I broke every hospital rule to save a dying man, only to realize my actions triggered a lockdown designed to bury a secret far more dangerous than a malpractice suit. The fluorescent lights of the emergency department hummed a constant, migraine-inducing tune, the soundtrack to my life for the last 12 years. I was Dr. Alastair Reed, chief resident, and as I stared at the monitor tracking Mr. Henderson's deteriorating vitals, I knew the official protocol was a death sentence. Mr. Henderson was 72, a retired history teacher who'd been brought in with what looked like a standard severe septic shock from an infected wound. We hit him with the Level 1 sepsis protocol, massive 1V fluids, broad-spectrum antibiotics, pressors to keep his blood pressure from plummeting into oblivion. But nothing was working. His lactate levels were climbing like mercury in a thermometer left in the sun. His organs were starting to shut down in sequence, and the clock was ticking louder than the heart monitor. "His urine output is near zero, doctor," the nurse, Sarah, murmured, her voice tight with worry. She'd seen this before. We both had. "The pressors are maxed out. We're barely holding him above 70 systolic." I leaned over the bedside, ignoring the antiseptic smell that clung to everything. His skin was cool and mottled, a dreadful sign of peripheral shutdown. I pulled up his history again. He had pre-existing renal impairment, something that complicated everything. The standard sepsis protocol demanded we keep pouring fluids in to wash out the toxins, but pouring fluid into a failing kidney is like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom while standing in a flood. "We need to switch the antibiotic regimen," I said, tapping the screen, my mind racing past the standard algorithms. "The initial culture is still pending, but based on the presentation, aggressive gram-negative, we need to pivot to something with better renal clearance, even if it means risking a temporary dip in overall efficacy while we wait for the official MIC results." Sarah's eyebrows shot up. "But doctor, that means pulling the Zosyn immediately. We only have 48 hours on the Zosyn standard before we're supposed to see a response, and we haven't hit the 48 yet. Dr. Albright specifically signed off on the Zosyn escalation this morning." Dr. Albright, my nemesis, the attending physician who lived and breathed by the hospital manual. Deviation wasn't just frowned upon, it was grounds for review, sanctions, potentially career-ending written warnings. My residency was due to finish in 3 months. A single documented procedural breach now, especially one involving a critical patient, and I'd be lucky to scrub toilets at a free clinic. "I understand the clock, Sarah," I said, my voice firm, masking the tremor in my hands. "But the clock is already broken for Mr. Henderson. He's dying by the book. We are running out of time to try something different. If we wait for the culture, he will be dead before sunrise. I'm ordering the switch to meropenem, high dose, and we're going to aggressively manage his fluid balance by adding a carefully calculated dose of IV hydrocortisone, off-label for this phase, but necessary to support vascular tone while we dial back the pressors." Sarah hesitated, her pen hovering over the order pad. "Dr. Reed, this is a major deviation from the sepsis bundle. If Albright sees this..." "Albright isn't the one going to sign the death certificate when we follow the bundle perfectly and he flatlines," I snapped, instantly regretting the sharpness of my tone. I softened my voice. "Sarah, I'm signing this myself. I'm taking full responsibility. Just run the order. Tell the pharmacist I need the meropenem immediately. Stat." She nodded slowly, fear mixed with grudging respect in her eyes. She knew I was right. Protocol was designed for the average patient, the textbook case. Mr. Henderson was not average. He was slipping through the cracks of standardized care. I spent the next 3 hours glued to his bedside, manually adjusting the drip rates, listening to the subtle changes in his breathing, watching the numbers tick agonizingly slowly. The meropenem infusion began. For the first hour, nothing. The pressors still had to fight tooth and nail just to keep him perfused. I felt the cold dread of failure creeping in. I'd risked my entire future on a hunch, a gamble against the statistical likelihood of survival. If he died now, I wouldn't just lose my career. I'd face inquiries regarding professional negligence, perhaps even an accusation of engaging in dangerous experimentation, the kind of thing that attracts the attention of the hospital's upper administration and their highly motivated legal teams. It felt like I had signed a contract forfeiting my future for this one desperate fight. Then, around 3 a.m., something shifted. It was infinitesimally small, barely noticeable over the noise of the department, but it was there. His mean arterial pressure, MAP, ticked up 2 points without an increase in norepinephrine. His skin, under the harsh light, seemed less ashen. "Sarah, check the lactate again," I whispered. She hurried over, drawing blood, her movements suddenly infused with nervous energy. We waited, tapping our feet against the linoleum floor, the silence in that little corner of the chaotic ER thick enough to choke on. The lab printout fluttered down onto the counter. Sarah snatched it up, her breath catching. "Doctor, the lactate, it's down. 4 points." 4 points in an hour. It was the first real sign of improvement we'd seen in 12 hours. The meropenem was hitting the target, and the hydrocortisone was stabilizing the failing vasculature enough for his body to start fighting back, instead of drowning in its own fluid and pressure demands. A wave of exhaustion mixed with giddy triumph washed over me. I'd done it. I'd broken the rules, bypassed the mandatory waiting periods, and saved him. I sank into a chair, rubbing my eyes, feeling the weight of the past night lift slightly. I reached for my phone to text my mentor. A risky move, perhaps, but I needed validation. That's when the door opened. It wasn't the frazzled night nurse or an orderly. It was Dr. Albright, crisp in his freshly pressed white coat, accompanied by a man in an ill-fitting dark suit who looked significantly out of place among the scrubs and trauma bays. This man carried himself with the quiet, intimidating authority of someone who deals in paperwork with serious consequences, someone who doesn't usually bother with 3 a.m. rounds in the middle of a septic crisis. Albright didn't look triumphant or even concerned about Mr. Henderson. His eyes were narrowed, fixed solely on me. "Dr. Reed," Albright said, his voice dangerously low, cutting through the ambient noise, "I trust you can explain why my administrative assistant alerted me to an emergency review flagged on your orders from the night shift change. It appears you initiated a significant undocumented deviation from the established sepsis management pathway concerning patient 417. And I see you've brought in an external consultant." He gestured stiffly toward the man in the suit, who merely inclined his head, his eyes colder than the sterile surfaces around us. "This gentleman," Albright continued, his voice dripping with controlled venom, "is here from the Office of Regulatory Compliance regarding potential breaches that could lead to immediate suspension pending a full investigation." The man from Regulatory Compliance, who introduced himself only as Mr. Thorne, never offering a first name, didn't look at the patient monitor. He looked only at me, cataloging every visible sign of my fatigue and panic. He pulled a thin, bound notepad from his inner jacket pocket, the spine clearly cracked from frequent use. "Dr. Reed," Thorne's voice was precisely modulated, possessing that chilling quality of someone who practices sounding reasonable while delivering ruin. "We received an anonymous, highly detailed report concerning procedural shortcuts taken during the management of this patient. Given the immediate life-threatening nature of the case, Dr. Albright escalated it to our attention immediately." Albright actually puffed his chest out slightly, leaning against the counter as if staking a territorial claim. He was enjoying this, basking in the sudden elevation of my mistake into an official inquiry. "It wasn't an anonymous report, Thorne," I countered, forcing my voice to remain level despite the rapid hammer blows against my ribs. "I entered the orders myself, clearly documented, and I informed my charge nurse, Sarah, of the rationale. I took responsibility the second I hit send on that meropenem infusion." Thorne didn't acknowledge my statement. He merely flipped a page on his notepad. The deviation involves the premature cessation of the prescribed broad-spectrum antibiotic Zosyn before the mandated culture susceptibility report was available, coupled with the introduction of high-dose corticosteroids outside of the accepted acute phase resuscitation guidelines for septic shock. He looked up, one eyebrow slightly raised. "Dr. Reed, are you denying that you knowingly violated mandated hospital policy regarding critical care pathways?" "I am denying that it was a violation," I stated firmly, stepping away from Mr. Henderson's bedside to face them both directly. I needed to control the narrative before Albright's self-serving version took root. I adhered to the spirit of the protocol, which is to save the patient. When the established pathway demonstrably fails, the physician's ethical and legal responsibility is to adapt based on clinical assessment. Mr. Henderson was hours away from irreversible organ failure, likely due to the drug clearance issues stemming from his renal status. Waiting for a culture result, which could have taken another 12 hours, was medically negligent. Sarah stepped forward before Albright could interrupt. "Sir, Dr. Reed was constantly monitoring the patient. He was the only one keeping the pressors balanced manually during the transition. He didn't sleep for the last 18 hours. This wasn't recklessness. It was exceptional attention to detail when the standard care was failing." Thorne finally looked at Sarah, a flicker of something, perhaps annoyance at the interruption, crossing his face. "Nurse, your commendation of Dr. Reed's diligence is noted. However, diligence does not supersede documented procedure, especially when the hospital must maintain compliance for federal funding and liability protection. Dr. Reed's actions place the institution at significant risk." Albright seized the opening. "Exactly. If this patient succumbs now, or if he develops a secondary infection due to an improper antibiotic change, the liability falls squarely on the attending physician who signed off on the orders, which, in this case, was Dr. Reed. He has effectively placed himself, and potentially me, as supervising physician, under investigation for unauthorized experimental treatment." I felt a sudden chilling clarity. Albright wasn't just angry about the protocol. He was terrified of being implicated, and he was eager to throw me under the bus to protect his own standing. "Experimental?" I laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Dr. Albright, we are using meropenem every day in this unit. The dose adjustment, based on GFR estimates for renal impairment, is a standard calculation taught in every residency program. The only real variable was the timing, which I moved forward based on immediate clinical necessity." Thorne closed his notepad with a soft thwack. "Dr. Reed, we have already pulled the order logs. Your digital signature is logged. We are not debating the pharmacology right now. We are debating compliance with the Administrative Code of Conduct, Section 4.2b. Given the seriousness of the charge, a failure to follow established life-saving protocols, we cannot allow you to continue treating patients pending the review." My heart plummeted. Suspension. That was the immediate penalty. It meant being barred from the hospital, unable to complete my residency, my career effectively derailed before I could even start it. "You can't suspend me," I managed, my voice husky. "Mr. Henderson is finally stabilizing. If you remove me now, Albright will revert to the old protocols, or worse, he'll panic and we'll lose the progress we've made." "That," Albright interjected smoothly, "is a matter for the supervising attending physician to decide. You are relieved of duty for patient 417, effective immediately. Mr. Thorne, where would you like to conduct the preliminary interview? My office is free." As Albright turned to lead Thorne away, I felt a desperate, suffocating panic. I looked at Mr. Henderson. He was still pale, but his vitals were steady, his color marginally better. If they pulled me, the momentum would stop. "Wait!" I shouted, louder than I intended. The department paused. Thorne and Albright turned back, annoyed at the disruption. "I understand the gravity of compliance," I conceded, taking a deep breath, my eyes locking onto Thorne's. "But you are investigating a potential breach based on a report. You haven't reviewed the patient's current status, which demonstrates the success of the intervention. If you suspend me now, you are making a punitive decision based on incomplete data, risking the patient's life to enforce an administrative rule. I stepped back toward the monitor, my fingers flying across the keyboard, pulling up the 12-hour trend graph. Look at the slope of the lactate clearance since 3:15 a.m. It's unprecedented for this stage of sepsis management under the standard protocol. You suspended me based on a fear of what might happen. I acted based on what is happening. If you suspend me now, you are essentially signing the death warrant for Mr. Henderson. Can regulatory compliance legally mandate the removal of a physician when that removal directly and demonstrably jeopardizes a patient's life? Thorne stared at the graph. Albright looked furious that I had brought the patient's improving condition into the legal argument. "That's not how this works, Reed," Albright hissed. "You are being investigated for gross misconduct." "Then let the investigation wait until the patient is stable enough to survive my absence," I pleaded, pointing at Thorne. "You have the power to pause disciplinary action in cases of overwhelming clinical necessity. I am invoking that necessity now. If you proceed with my suspension right now, Mr. Thorne, I want it on the record that I believe you are responsible for the patient's subsequent demise. I am not backing down from responsibility, but I am demanding you address the current, living, breathing consequences of your intervention." Thorne studied the graph for a long, tense moment. He looked deeply conflicted, caught between the rigidity of bureaucracy and the undeniable, visible proof of clinical success. He tapped his pen against his notepad again, a different rhythm this time. "Dr. Reed," Thorne finally said, his voice quieter, almost grudging, "I will agree to a temporary deferral of the suspension order, a mandatory hold for the next 12 hours. You remain on duty, but every order you write will be co-signed by Dr. Albright, who will be present at the bedside. If Mr. Henderson's condition deteriorates in any measurable way during this window, the hold is immediately revoked and you will be escorted from the premises. Do you agree to these terms?" I nodded before he finished the sentence. 12 hours. It was a stay of execution, not a pardon. I agree. Albright looked like he'd swallowed battery acid. "Co-signed? You want me tethered to his every move? Fine, but the second he slips, Reed, you're finished." Thorne nodded once, seemingly satisfied he had contained the situation for the moment. He turned to leave with Albright trailing him, muttering about policy manuals. I watched them go, then slumped back against the counter, heart racing. I had bought myself 12 hours. Just as I turned back to check Mr. Henderson's IV pump settings, my phone vibrated violently in my scrub pocket. It wasn't a text. It was an official hospital security alert pinging across my device. I pulled it out, expecting a notification about the internal server maintenance that always happened overnight. Instead, the screen displayed a large flashing banner under the heading, "Security Incident, Immediate Attention Required." It wasn't about Mr. Henderson, or the compliance review, or Dr. Albright. The message read, "Unforeseen breach detected. Main server room C4. All personnel restricted. Internal security alert level 3 initiated." Below that, a single line of text that made the blood drain from my face, overriding the exhaustion and the panic about my job. It was a message clearly meant for an administrator, accidentally routed to my personal emergency alert. The external monitoring firm confirms. Data extraction initiated. The files related to the Phoenix Initiative are being copied. The Phoenix Initiative. That wasn't hospital business. That was the black-budget, highly illegal data recovery project I had accidentally stumbled upon 3 months ago while fixing a firewall glitch. A project that dealt with something far more dangerous than medical malpractice. Something involving evidence the service was trying to bury. Evidence that could implicate people much higher up than Dr. Albright. And now, someone was stealing that data. Right now, while I was tied up dealing with a rogue septic patient and a compliance officer. The security alert felt like a physical punch. The Phoenix Initiative files weren't just embarrassing internal documents. They contained sealed evidence regarding a past, highly sensitive investigation involving allegations of systemic corruption within the city's infrastructure contracts. The kind of sensitive data that a simple internal security firm wouldn't be monitoring unless it was tied to something explosive, something bordering on what could be considered a severe national security issue, or at least an egregious attempt to subvert justice. The files proved that powerful individuals had successfully covered up a massive financial scandal years ago, effectively shielding themselves from any serious investigation, a truth I had sworn to forget the moment I saw the encrypted directories. My reprieve with Thorne and Albright vanished. The threat of losing my medical license suddenly seemed like a minor inconvenience compared to the implications of the server breach. If the data extraction completed, those files and the people involved in those old allegations would be exposed. And if I was the one who flagged the breach, even accidentally, I was now directly implicated in uncovering something the powerful actors in those files would kill to keep buried. I gripped the phone so tightly I thought the screen might crack. "Mr. Thorne, Dr. Albright, stop!" They turned back at the doorway, annoyance etched onto their faces. Albright was already halfway out. "What now, Reed? Is Mr. Henderson crashing already?" Albright sneered, clearly eager to watch me fail. "No, he's stable," I managed, my voice strained. "But there's a major security breach in server room C4. It's active. Data extraction is underway. It involves the Phoenix files." The effect of those 3 words, Phoenix files, was instantaneous. Albright froze mid-stride. Thorne stopped dead, his bureaucratic composure finally cracking. Thorne's eyes snapped to the alert on my phone, then rapidly scanned the surrounding hallway as if expecting armed men to materialize. "That's impossible," Thorne breathed, taking an involuntary step back toward the nurse's station. "The Phoenix monitoring is supposed to be entirely closed loop, no external alerts." Albright recovered faster, his face hardening into a mask of icy control. "Reed, you are hallucinating from exhaustion. You need to step away from the patient and go secure yourself in the on-call room. I will speak to security about the server alert." "No," I said, planting my feet. This was the moment. I had leverage now, not just over Albright, but over Thorne, the man who held my immediate fate in his hands. The alert specifically routed to my emergency notification, the one I only got because I was fixing that glitch months ago. If someone is pulling those files right now, they are proving the necessity of those files existing. If I step away and you sweep this under the rug again, Albright, or you let Thorne sweep it under the rug, then the people behind that data extraction succeed. I turned to Thorne. "You were here investigating my procedural deviation, which is minor compared to this. If you allow me to be removed, you are tacitly agreeing to let the culprits escape justice again. I am the only one who knows exactly where those files are located on the server map, and I know the back doors I built in case the official monitoring failed." Thorne's gaze was piercing, calculating. The balance of power had flipped dramatically. He wasn't just worried about a hospital review anymore. He was likely facing a much larger, much more dangerous internal failure. "Dr. Reed," Thorne said, his tone shifting from prosecutor to reluctant collaborator, "if this is true, the scope changes dramatically. You will accompany me. Dr. Albright, you will remain here with patient 417. Do not, under any circumstances, let that patient's condition degrade. If he worsens, I will hold you personally responsible, regardless of what happens upstairs." Albright looked furious, but the fear in his eyes told me he knew Thorne's threat was genuine. He nodded curtly, already moving toward the monitor. Thorne grabbed my arm, not gently, leading me toward the main administrative corridor, far from the familiar chaos of the ED. As we walked, the hospital seemed to change. The lights seemed dimmer, the halls unnervingly quiet, despite the Level 3 alert flashing on monitors near the security checkpoints. Tell me exactly what you saw, Thorne demanded. A forced data siphon. Destination unknown, but the payload was clearly marked Phoenix Encrypt Keys, Historical Audit Subset. It was initiated via an external IP masquerading as a legitimate service provider update. I built a fail-safe trigger, a digital alarm, to notify me if anyone tried to pull those specific directory trees. I didn't expect it to go off tonight. We reached the access control for the restricted IT wing. Thorne slapped his high-level access card against the reader. The heavy steel door hissed open. Inside, the environment control system whirred loudly, a stark contrast to the low murmur of the ED. The main server room is locked down internally by our security team, but the initial point of entry was likely administrative access. Someone with high-level credentials who knew exactly what they were looking for, Thorne muttered, pulling out his phone, which was now flashing with data feeds I couldn't see. My team is fighting them at the firewall, but if the extraction is already underway, they are downloading faster than we can block. We reached the server room door, a thick bank vault of metal. The internal security team was already there, 2 grim-faced men in tactical gear, looking equally stressed. "Status," Thorne barked. "Still fighting the outbound connection, sir," one operative reported. "It's an aggressive, multi-threaded stream. We've isolated the physical ports they're using, but they seem to have remote administrative access to the port management console. We can't cut the physical connection without risking a total server crash, which would lose the patient data we are trying to save." "And the Phoenix files?" I cut in urgently. "Those are on a segmented drive, Dr. Reed. The data extraction program seems to have bypassed that segment entirely," the second guard reported. "Wait, no, that's wrong. The program is rerouting. It's hitting the segmented drive now. It's dumping the Phoenix subset." Thorne swore under his breath. "How long until dump completion?" "Estimated at 4 minutes, sir. Maybe less, given the bandwidth spike we're seeing." 4 minutes. 4 minutes until I was either completely ruined by Albright and compliance or completely ruined by the powerful people whose secrets I was accidentally exposing. And I was still hours away from knowing if Mr. Henderson would survive the night. "Thorne, you need to physically cut the line," I urged, stepping toward the stunned security team. "Forget the integrity of the database for 1 second. If those files leave this building, people will disappear, and I'm the one who set the alarm. I can't face the consequences of that exposure when I'm already fighting for my license. And I cannot risk losing the medical patient data required for the review, Reed," Thorne retorted, his voice rising to a near shout. "If we crash the system now, Albright has his ammunition, and you are suspended instantly." The tension was unbearable. 4 minutes. I looked desperately around the server room, my eyes catching on an emergency maintenance panel near the ceiling, a relic from when the hospital was first built, predating the current digital security framework. It controlled the physical power distribution for that section of the floor. "The panel above the main cooling unit," I pointed, adrenaline flooding my system, wiping away the last vestiges of tiredness. "That feeds the auxiliary power grid for this wing, including the console that manages the port configuration. If we kill that circuit, we might physically sever their connection without crashing the core operating system." Thorne looked up, skeptical. "That's an archaic manual override. It's highly unstable." "Unstable is better than compromised." I leaped onto a nearby rolling cart, scrambling onto the cooling unit housing. I yanked open the dusty panel. Inside were thick, color-coded cables, ancient and intimidating. "Which one is the primary fiber trunk for Port Management Console B?" Thorne was already conferring rapidly with the security team, his voice low and intense, clearly processing the risk assessment. He glanced up at me, hovering precariously near the ceiling. "The thick blue-striped cable, Reed. But if you pull the wrong one, you cut life support to the ICU upstairs." My hand hovered over the cluster of wires. The blue-striped cable looked identical to 3 others. I had seconds to decide which thread to pull, the one that might save my job, the one that might save Mr. Henderson, or the one that might kill an entire floor of critical patients upstairs. Just as my fingers brushed the insulation of the thick blue-striped cable, my phone chimed again. Not a security alert this time, but a frantic priority text message sent directly from the ED. It was from Sarah. Code Blue, Mr. Henderson. Albright called it. Pressors are dropping fast. He's pulling the meropenem. The message from Sarah hit me like a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. He's pulling the meropenem. Albright hadn't just waited for the 12-hour window to expire. He'd actively reversed the only successful intervention. He was ensuring Mr. Henderson died, thereby guaranteeing the grounds for my immediate, unchallengeable dismissal for documented clinical failure. My temporary stay of execution had just become the reason for a fatality inquiry. "He's crashing," I roared, dropping down from the maintenance panel, ignoring Thorne's horrified shout. The Phoenix files, the compliance investigation, Mr. Thorne himself, all faded into static noise. Mr. Henderson was dying because Albright was a vindictive coward. "Reed, stay put," Thorne commanded, lunging toward me. "We are minutes from a massive security breach. You cannot leave this area." I shoved past him, adrenaline lending me a strength I didn't know I possessed. I bolted out of the server room, the security team momentarily paralyzed, caught between the external threat and the internal emergency unfolding in the ED. I sprinted back down the sterile hallway, the Level 3 alert flashing uselessly on the walls. My world had narrowed to the sound of my own gasping breath and the image of that blinking, fatal Code Blue notification. I burst back into the emergency department. The scene was chaos, but a different, focused chaos than before. Dr. Albright stood over Mr. Henderson's bed, his face grim, holding a syringe. Sarah was trying to physically block him, her hands outstretched, tears welling in her eyes. "Get your hands off that, doctor," Albright yelled at Sarah, his voice booming. "I am the attending physician. The panel has been informed of the patient's rapid decline due to the unauthorized medication change. I am terminating the experimental drug and returning him to standard pressor support." "Standard support failed him," I yelled, vaulting over a nearby supply cart. I reached the bedside just as Albright brought the syringe, containing what looked like a bolus of high-concentration norepinephrine, toward the IV line leading into Mr. Henderson's arm. "Stop, Dr. Albright. If you bolus pressors when his vascular system is still recovering from the shock of the meropenem transition, you will cause an acute hypertensive crisis and rupture something." I grabbed his wrist, the syringe shaking violently between us. "He needs time to clear the toxins, not another chemical shock." Albright tried to wrench his arm free, his face contorted with rage. "You are relieved of duty. You have no authority here, Reed. This is insubordination, and it will be added to the list of offenses for the compliance review." "Your review is meaningless if the patient is dead." I locked my grip on his wrist. The irony was suffocating. I was fighting a career-ending battle over protocol just moments ago, and now I was committing assault against an attending physician to uphold the protocol that was working. Sarah saw her chance. While Albright was focused entirely on me, she grabbed the line controlling the meropenem infusion, which was still dripping slowly, and slammed the roller clamp shut. "The drug is stopped, doctor, but I'm not letting you push that pressor bolus." We were locked in a primal tug of war. Albright was stronger, fueled by institutional power and pure malice. But I was fueled by adrenaline and the immediate need to save a life that was finally, tentatively, climbing out of the grave. Suddenly, the magnetic lock on the main ED doors clicked open, and Mr. Thorne strode in, followed by the two security personnel. Thorne had clearly abandoned the server room. His suit was slightly disheveled, and he moved with terrifying speed. Thorne didn't yell. He didn't even look at the monitor. He focused entirely on Albright and me wrestling over the syringe. "What is the status of patient 417?" Thorne demanded, his voice cutting through the tense silence. Sarah, still holding the meropenem line closed, managed to speak. "Lactate holding steady since 4 a.m., sir. Vitals were stable until Dr. Reed was pulled away. Then Dr. Albright initiated an unscheduled pressor escalation." Albright finally succeeded in wrenching his arm free from my grasp. He stumbled back a step, clutching the syringe like a weapon, breathing heavily. "He instigated physical violence, Thorne. He is resisting a clear order from the supervising physician. He is unstable." Thorne ignored Albright completely. He looked at the monitor, his eyes scanning the numbers for just a second. Then he looked at me, then back at Albright. The calculation was visible on his face. Albright was ensuring a patient death to secure a cover-up, while Reed was physically fighting to keep a patient alive. The priorities had shifted again. "Dr. Albright," Thorne said, his voice dangerously soft, "drop the syringe. Slowly." Albright hesitated, the syringe trembling in his hand. He looked at Thorne, realizing that the compliance officer was no longer concerned with hospital rules, but with a much larger accountability issue. "This is medical malpractice," Albright choked out, his authority dissolving. "I am following procedure." "No," Thorne countered. "You are actively sabotaging established care to facilitate the removal of a resident you personally dislike. That is terminationable, Doctor. Drop the syringe." Albright's face went white. He knew he was cornered. With a shuddering breath, he let the syringe fall. It clattered harmlessly onto the rubber floor matting. I didn't wait for Albright to be escorted out. I spun back to Mr. Henderson. His color was already worse. The brief spike in norepinephrine Albright had managed to push through the line before Sarah clamped it had clearly shocked his system. "Sarah, reopen the meropenem line. Slow drip, half the previous rate. I need to titrate the pressors back down manually. Now." I grabbed the pressor pump controls. As I began the agonizing process of dialing back the maximum dose, trying to stabilize the damage Albright had inflicted in the minute I was gone, Thorne stepped up next to me. He didn't offer medical help. Instead, he placed a hand on my shoulder, a gesture that felt less like comfort and more like restraint. "Dr. Reed," Thorne whispered, pulling me slightly away from the patient, his eyes darting to the entrance where Albright was being quietly escorted away by the guards. "The server breach is still active. My team is still fighting them off. I can make the compliance review disappear. I can give you back your residency. I can protect you from Albright. But you are coming with me, right now. We have to secure the access point before the data extraction completes, or none of this matters." He leaned in close, his breath hot in my ear. "If you come with me now, you have a future. If you stay here and the Phoenix data leaks, they won't investigate your residency status. They will investigate whether you were involved in leaking state secrets. The people behind that data don't care about medical ethics." I looked from Thorne's desperate, pleading face to Mr. Henderson's struggling form. I had bought him 12 hours. Now I had seconds to choose between saving my patient and saving myself from a far more sinister threat. Just then, a new alert flashed across the main triage screen, overriding everything else. It wasn't a code blue. It was a different, more chilling type of hospital-wide communication, coming directly from the highest administrative level, overriding Thorne's security alert. "Emergency lockdown. External threat identified. All personnel must immediately evacuate the facility. Do not attempt to secure data or equipment. Evacuate now." And then, just as the internal emergency sirens began to wail, a new text message hit my phone. Not from Sarah, but from an unknown number. It was a single photo, a high-resolution clear shot of me, right now, standing over Mr. Henderson's bed, wrestling with Albright over the syringe. The timestamp on the photo was precisely 3 minutes ago. The caption underneath read, "You chose the wrong fight, Doctor. Pay attention to the next move." The external threat alert and the immediate order to evacuate shattered the remaining semblance of control in the emergency department. The wail of the evacuation sirens was deafening, drowning out the low mechanical hum of the monitors. The photo on my phone, sent by an unknown sender, was the final, terrifying confirmation. Someone was watching. Someone was orchestrating events, and they were using both Mr. Henderson's crisis and the compliance investigation as cover for something much larger. Thorne's face was ashen. The calculated veneer was gone, replaced by naked fear. He understood the gravity of a hospital-wide evacuation, coupled with an active data breach involving politically explosive material. "This isn't a leak anymore," Thorne muttered, grabbing my sleeve. "This is a hostile takeover of the infrastructure. They're forcing a system-wide shutdown to cover the data extraction." I yanked my arm free, shoving Thorne toward the door, toward the exit sign that was now flashing ominously red. "The Phoenix files are still on that server. If they get out, people die. Albright was a distraction, Thorne. He was just enough noise to keep me occupied while the real thieves operated. And you are the only one who knows the manual override sequence for that segmented drive," Thorne shouted back, regaining his composure instantly as the threat became external and undeniable. "We have to get back to C4. But running back into the heart of a building under lockdown was suicide, especially if the people extracting the data were now actively hostile. I took one last desperate look at Mr. Henderson. His breathing was shallow, his pressure fluctuating wildly as Albright's forced presser push destabilized his fragile recovery. Sarah was frantically trying to reestablish the slow meropenem drip, but her hands were shaking too violently. "Sarah, listen to me," I barked over the sirens, kneeling by her side. "You have the marrow drip open. Keep it slow. Do not touch the pressors unless his MAP drops below 60 for more than 5 minutes. Forget the protocol. Keep him breathing. I'm coming back, I promise." I didn't wait for confirmation. The threat against the Phoenix data was existential, but the immediate threat to Mr. Henderson was in front of me. I knew I couldn't leave him without ensuring the right person was in charge. I looked at Sarah, the steady, experienced nurse who had trusted my judgment when the official rules said no. "Sarah, you are in command here until the first official responder reaches this area. If you need help, page Dr. Chen from cardiology. He's an old-school clinician. Tell him exactly what I did and why. Do not let anyone touch the pressors unless the patient is actively coding without them." I turned to Thorne. "The data extraction has to be stopped now. If we can't stop it remotely, we have to stop the facility from shutting down around it. If the power grid fails during the dump, the system will crash and the data will be lost, but not cleanly. It will corrupt everything, including whatever evidence you're trying to protect." We ran. The hallways, usually bustling, were eerily empty, punctuated only by the distant shouting of security teams scrambling for evacuation assembly points. As we reached the IT corridor, the emergency lights flickered ominously. "The manual override," Thorne gasped, winded. "The one you pointed out. We have to cut power to the console management system before the dump finishes." We rushed back into the server room. The 2 security guards were gone, having likely followed the evacuation order. The massive console bank was humming with unnatural intensity. The countdown timer on one of the remaining active monitors read 0048. 48 seconds until the data siphon completed. I leaped back onto the rolling cart. This time, there was no hesitation. I located the thick blue-striped cable, the power feed to the console management port, and grabbed it with both hands. "If I pull this, Thorne, the system should lock, but the main server integrity should remain intact." "Do it!" I yanked down with all my strength. The sound was less of a snap and more of a deep, grinding electrical surge that echoed painfully in the enclosed room. The console screen went instantly, profoundly black. The humming intensity dropped to a low thrum. The countdown timer vanished. Silence. A real silence this time, broken only by the distant, muffled sound of the external evacuation sirens. Thorne rushed to the now-dead console, his hands running over the cool metal. It worked. The outbound connection is severed. They got most of it, I'm sure, but the final push failed. The system is stable enough for a clean forensic analysis now. He looked at me, a genuine, tired smile touching his lips. "You saved the investigation, Dr. Reed." "And Mr. Henderson?" I whispered, my body shaking from exhaustion and the sudden release of adrenaline. Thorne pulled out his personal satellite phone, something that clearly wasn't supposed to be used on hospital grounds, and made a quick, urgent call. He listened intently, nodding once, then hung up. "I just got an update via an off-site channel," Thorne said, looking directly at me. "Mr. Henderson is critical, but stable. Sarah held the line. They are preparing him for transfer to the ICU, and the meropenem is being continued as per your initial order, which Dr. Albright foolishly tried to reverse. He's hanging on." Relief washed over me, so potent it almost brought me to my knees. "Now," Thorne continued, his voice regaining that professional edge, but this time it was aimed at protection, not prosecution. "The evacuation is in place. The people who ordered that dump are scattering. They will assume you are either dead or in custody, nowhere near the scene." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick, unmarked manila envelope, handing it to me. "This is your official suspension notice for procedural deviation, issued preemptively by Albright before he was detained by security. It's meaningless now. More importantly, this contains a complete, sealed affidavit stating that your actions tonight were necessary to maintain the integrity of the facility under duress, and that Dr. Albright is under investigation for obstruction of justice and gross negligence." He paused, his eyes serious. "The Phoenix Files are now the problem of much higher authorities than myself. They will be recovered, and the people responsible for that data's cover-up will face consequences they never anticipated. Your role in setting the alarm was noted. Your quick action here secured evidence that will shake up half the city council." Thorne leaned in one last time. "You saved the patient when it mattered most. You saved the evidence when it mattered most. You're lucky you weren't implicated in the theft, Reed. Go home. Your residency is secure, conditional on one thing. You never speak about the Phoenix Initiative, Server Room C4, or Mr. Thorne to anyone, not even Sarah. You saved Mr. Henderson by breaking rules, and you saved the city by being in the right place at the wrong time. Now disappear until the dust settles." He gestured toward the exit, already turning his attention back to the silent, dead console. I didn't need telling twice. I walked out of the cold server room, past the echoing, empty hallways, carrying the weight of secrets and the fragile promise of a future. As I stepped outside into the cold morning air, joining the stream of bewildered, evacuated staff, I pulled out my phone one last time. I found Sarah's number and typed 3 words: simple, honest, and true. He's stable. I'm free.